Good evening. I'm being showered with so many surprises. So it's really a happy time. Although the book is about grim things. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Shashi Tharoor for his usual brilliant oratory that brings together complex thoughts in very, very eloquent ways. I did miss UNHCR in the book, and the reason was for the sake of comparison. UNHCR did not have locus standi in the Philippines, and therefore I left it out. I looked at the same international organizations in two different but comparable cases of armed conflict. So that was an omission. But I also want to thank Rajiv ji for amazing from the heart presentation on how nonviolence can be a way out of these seemingly intractable conflicts that end up in great misery and sorrow and suffering. So for two and a half years, I was in the field, as the humanitarian lingo goes, in Batticaloa and Trincomalee districts of Sri Lanka. And for over a year, I was in southern Mindanao, southwestern Mindanao, both of which were, of course, dangerous terrain. And I had not intended to convert all the observations of these two war zones into a book, but it came about because of observation of various puzzles. And some of our students are here. As you know, research begins by looking at empirical puzzles, real-world puzzles, and then trying to come up with viable explanations for why these things happen. So the puzzle facing me was, why are some of these aid agencies very proactive while others are not? And that's how the comparative framework for the research came about. Of course, I was not a disinterested scholar, and certainly, unlike many others who have actually been hosted by aid agencies while they come to do their field work, I actually lived, and I probably did, as Rajivji said, more daredevilry than many of the aid agency staff did. And so we coexisted in the same war zone, but I was doing peace with justice was my agenda, while the aid agencies, of course, limited themselves mostly to material relief. So the big question was, why don't they do more proactive actions as well as advocacy for political and civil rights of civilians? And in a war zone, I've critiqued the concept of developmentalism, which I've said should only come in a post-conflict setting. But most of the aid agencies remained in this developmentalist mode, where they spoke at most about socioeconomic rights, but not about civil and political rights, which are up front and center in a war zone where people's lives are on the line, where abduction, torture, intimidation, threats, disappearance are the norms. So the thinking was, if these aid agencies have access to the ground, to some of the remotest regions where people are disappearing, being threatened, or are being abducted day in and out, how can they go about business as usual? And in fact, at the international level, when Dr. Tharoor was at the UN, after the Rwanda fiasco, there was a consensus that we need to mainstream protection into international organizations. So my book is in many ways a retrospect, 15 years down the line, of whether they have managed to mainstream protection. And if not, why not? So I've used political science theory. I must say that when I read Reasons of State, Dr. Tharoor's dissertation, which was also his first book, it didn't make sense to me in first reading. I must have been 16, I just entered St. Stephen's. And then there was this hall of fame of great old boys, Amitav Ghosh, Shashi Tharoor, from the same generation. So, perforce I had to, pick it from the library and see what these great souls have done, why are they so great, right? So, theory, I hardly had any inkling of it, just entering undergraduate education. But what I was most intrigued by was the opening chapter, which was theory heavy, and which spoke about different ways in which domestic politics influences foreign affairs. So I think that book is still relevant, and I always tell him that it's his best book He's written 9 so far, I think, and out of which the first is always the best. And I'm sure that stands with me too with my first singly authored book, which you're all seeing today. So theory and its application to these real-world problems is the fulcrum of research. And I think I have tried to triangulate it with values as well. Johann Galtung, the famous peace scholar, objects to the notion of neutral science, which is supposed to only be an interplay between theory and empirical evidence. Right? So in philosophy of science, we are told that this is how you construct it. But Galtung says that there's a third corner to this. It's actually a triangle, which is theory, empirics, and values. So I certainly brought my Gandhian values to the table. When I wrote the book, when I did my peacekeeping work, these were up front. I certainly brought my belief that peace cannot be obtained without justice, and that charity is not really a substitute for justice. So these were the underlying, you can say, the ontological basis on which this book has been built. I want to thank a number of people who contributed to this work. First and foremost, my parents who are here and who have been, real inspiring lights. They have shown me why the world must be taken seriously and why India exists, but it exists in a larger cosmos, and why we must look at it as a whole and not simply our own local and parochial settings. So my internationalism comes from my parents. There have been moments in my career when I hesitated to go forward with this research because I was criticizing some very, very established institutions. But at the same time, my wife, who's an artist, Ushada Merla, would tell me that you are a pursuer of truth and you should not hesitate. You should not step back simply because you believe that you're treading on toes. So I thank her profusely for this. Of course, everyone's been acknowledged in the book, but I wanted to make a special mention. My colleagues and students are here. Last but not least, Chancellor Naveen Jindal, who I always believe is the future of India because in his mannerisms, in his actions, and of course in his vision and thinking, I don't think we need to despair about this country's future, because he's consistently shown how you can bring these same values I'm talking about and tie it with energy and vision and vigor and actually create great institutions like the university at which I work. Our Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajkumar, has, of course, been mentoring me for over 10 years now, and I have learned so much from him that it's impossible to convey in such a small capsule. But I just want to say that the indefatigable energy that he brings and the live wire presence that he has, I think is something, just like our Chancellor, something that rubs off. It's very infectious. And what it does is it spurs you to want to achieve excellence. And I'm sure the reason he set up OP Jindal Global University is not to perpetuate mediocrity, but to create something extraordinary. And I'm so grateful for the diplomatic presence and for members from the media and from my own colleagues and the students who've all come here to hear us. Because in the process of your affirmation of my scholarship and my work, you have done honor, especially to Chancellor Jindal and to Vice Chancellor Rajkumar. So thank you all very much. Thank you especially to Viva, who have distributed and who have reprinted my work from IB Tauris, London. Mr. Binu Bhalla has been very kind, so has Mr. Sapru. And we very much hope to continue being associated with them. I am working on a new book, which should emerge by middle of next year. It's about counterinsurgencies and how central governments use local elites, and it's called the Center Satraps, and it's due out by mid 2012. So I look forward to another such event, and I very much hope you will continue to support my work. And I am in many ways humbled by this star gathering both in the front rows and here on stage, and it just makes me believe that I am capable of making a point and of it generating ideas that will benefit as Professor Campbell, whose message was read out, benefit the ordinary Joe and Jane and the average person, because I'm not on left or right, I'm for the average person, and I've always believed that public interest, which Chancellor Jindal represents, is also my motto. Thank you so much.